Hello, boys and girls. This is Module 5, Topic 1, Lesson 1. We are starting a brand new module, and this module focuses on geometry. We're starting this lesson, or excuse me, we're starting today with slicing and dicing. We're talking about composite figures. So let's get started with the getting started. It reads, consider each composite figure shown. Number 1, show how you could decompose each figure into two or more familiar figures. Describe the shapes that you made up that made up the composite figure for A and B. Then number 2, it says show how you could compose each figure into a larger familiar figure. Describe the shapes that make up the composite figure. So, what I want you to do now is I want you to look at number 1 and number 2. And again, I'm going to read the directions. Clarify the directions. So for number 1, you are decomposing into two or more familiar figures. So a familiar figure, a square, a triangle, a rectangle, a trapezoid, those are familiar. And then for number 2, you're composing, so you're making it larger so that it resembles a familiar figure. So at this time, I want you to pause and take 2 minutes to answer questions 1 and 2. You're drawing lines to compose and decompose those figures. 2 minutes. Pause here. All right, let's review 1 and 2. So for 1 and 2, we all may have different answers, but as long as you follow the directions, you will still understand the concept. So for number 1, it's asking how can you decompose this figure? So decompose means to break apart. Looking at figure A, I'm just going to draw a line here, and I'm going to draw a line here. Now I can see that I've got 1, 2, 3 rectangles, and those are familiar shapes to me. If you drew it a different way, if you drew it a different way, that is okay, because like I said, our answers will vary. But as long as you can see two or more familiar figures in your shape, you've got it correct. For B, I'm going to go ahead and just draw a line here. And now I've got two familiar shapes. I've got a trapezoid and a rectangle. For number 2, we are composing it, so we are making it bigger by adding lines. I would go ahead and just add a line here, and now that then creates a larger rectangle. For B, I can draw my lines here, and by drawing that triangle in the corner, again, I was able to form a larger rectangle. Alrighty, pretty simple. Let's move on. Next page, it says, consider the blueprint of a floor plan for a kitchen, dining room, and living room combination. So here we've got a blueprint for someone's first floor of their house. Number 3 says, suppose the homeowner wants to replace the floors in the rooms. So we're talking about the floors here. A, Wanda says she can determine the total area of flooring needed by decomposing the blueprint into two rectangles. Naveed says he can determine the total area of flooring needed by composing the blueprint into one large rectangle and then subtracting the unused area. Who is correct? Now, before we answer anything, I want you to take a moment and think about who might be correct, because in a second, you're going to be discussing with a partner. So again, Wanda says that she can determine the area by decomposing the blueprint, so taking it apart, and she's going to take it apart and form two rectangles. Where Naveed says that he's going to compose the area into one large rectangle, find the area, and then subtract the unused area. Which one of those are correct? So think about that. Set a timer for 1 minute and discuss with your neighbor. 1 minute. Pause here. All right, now that you've discussed, let's sum it up. So Wanda and Naveed, both of them are essentially saying what we did in the first part of the getting started. Wanda is saying, I can decompose my figure, break it down, find the areas, and put it together. Naveed is saying, I can make it one big shape and then subtract the part I'm unusing or not using. So they're both correct. Now we're going to calculate the amount using Wanda's method and Naveed's method. Now, I don't want us to spend too much time on this one activity because we've got so much more learning to do. So I'm only going to give you 3 minutes to solve, and that's 3 minutes to solve for the area using one of those methods. So either Wanda or Naveed's method. So if you're going to do Wanda's method, show your work under B. If you're going to do Naveed's method, show your work underneath C. Now, one thing before you get started, be mindful of the missing measurements. So I'll give you one as an example. So I'm looking right here at the bottom of the living room. It doesn't tell me what the measurement is. However, I can reason about what the measurement is by looking at the measurements that are parallel to it. So, for an example, if I know that this long edge is 30, and I know that this shorter edge here is 12, well, from here to here is 12. From here to here, I'd have to subtract to figure out what is that missing length. Well, 30 minus 12 gives us 18. So I know that this side is 18 feet. All right, I just helped you out a little bit, but you still do have one more side to figure out on your own. One thing I did forget, you may not have a reference sheet in front of you. That's okay. I'm going to get one in front of you in a second. But for now, use this formula here. For a rectangle, area is equal to base times the height. Use that formula here for rectangles. All right, 3 minutes on the clock. Go ahead and focus on question B and C, solving one of those to find the area of this floor plan. 3 minutes. Pause here. Alrighty, now that you've had time to work, let's go ahead and review our answers. So, if you either did Wanda or Naveed's method, you would have gotten the same answer, which was 570 feet squared. With Wanda's method, which was B, notice I labeled and organized my work. I first found the area of the small square, and I literally wrote in blue, small square. A is equal to base times height. I always write my formula first. That is a good practice. Make sure you're always writing your formula first. Say it with me. Formula first. All right. Then I found that the small area of my rectangle was 10 times 12, which gave me 120. And then the large rectangle, which was the dining room and the living room, I found was 450 because I multiplied 15 times 30. Now, question for you. Which do you think would be more efficient? Do you think if I were to break this shape down into more than two squares would be more efficient? So for example, if I were to break it like this, where now I've got 1, 2, 3 rectangles, or do you think it's more efficient when I broke it down into 2? Well, just letting you know, the less amount or the least amount of shapes that you have to calculate is going to be the more efficient way, or else you're going to be calculating the area of several different shapes. And the more I can do in less problems and less equations, the better. All right, and for Naveed's method, what I did was I saw that the large rectangle was 30 feet by 25 feet. I found the area, which was 750. And then for the small rectangle, which I drew in black, I found that the base and the height were 10 and 18. And so that smaller area was only 180 feet squared. What I had to do next was then subtract those, and then you would have gotten 570. So this learning right here actually isn't new. This is something that you guys did back in module 1, topic 1. So we're just bringing in that knowledge of organizing our work, decomposing and composing shapes to find total area. Alrighty, so now you've got the basic total understanding of this lesson. This concludes the Getting Started activity. I will see you in the next video.